It's midnight in New York, 5 in London, and 1 on a Friday afternoon here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Moon Gun-young. We continue our special coverage on the ferry sinking off South Korea's southwestern coast, and we have news just coming in from the ferry disaster site that 2 more bodies have been recovered, putting the current death toll at 28. And for more details, we'll go straight over to our Hwang Sung-hee. She is standing by at the Central Disaster Safety Headquarters in Seoul. Sung-hee, so we have more death tolls. Give us the latest.
Kanyang, the bodies of 2 male students have been recovered about 500 meters away from the capsized vessel just moments ago. This comes after a body of a man who appears to be in his 50s wearing a life jacket was recovered earlier today. Now, this puts the death toll at 28. 12 bodies have been confirmed as high school students, 2 teachers, 3 crew members, and 1 passenger. 8 bodies have yet to be identified, but 5 are speculated to be high school students. 268 people still remain missing, and unfortunately, the number of survivors remain unchanged.
No, Sung-hee, but we do have some hopeful news as divers successfully have found a route to the hull of the Seoul ferry earlier today and are currently trying to find out whether there are any survivors inside the submerged ship. And not only that, they have started pumping oxygen into the vessel. So what can you give us on the latest efforts on the search and rescue operations front?
All right, some good news. The rescue team successfully entered the capsized vessel through the cafeteria earlier this morning at 10:05 a.m. Korea time today. The cafeteria is on the 3rd floor of the ship, and the rescue team has installed 3 guidelines that can reach there. 8 divers will be in rotation on a search for any survivors in the vessel. The time span that divers can remain underwater is about 10 minutes. The team will begin a full-scale rescue operations in the cafeteria at 3 p.m. Korea time today. The Coast Guard has also began successfully injecting oxygen into the vessel earlier this morning. And now with this, hopes are rising for news of possible survivors more than 2 days now after the Seoul ferry capsized. But for now, no news of any survivors. Kanyang?
And we will be looking forward for news of that. Thank you, Sung-hee, for that update. That was ARIRANG News' Hwang Sung-hee reporting from the Central Disaster Safety Headquarters in Seoul. Let's try getting a better sense of the situation down in Chindo, what might have caused this huge ferry to sink, and the terrain the rescue teams are dealing with there in Korea's southwestern coast. For that, Kim Peterson joins us live on the line. He is the president of Security Dynamics LLC and Governor Emeritus of the Maritime Security Council. Mr. Peterson, thank you for joining us. Let's start with the search and rescue operation underway down in Korea's southwestern coast. What is your assessment of the quality and the scale of the rescue operations? I mean, how does it compare with previous salvage operations carried out by other countries?
Well, first of all, I have to congratulate the various government and private entities that are working together on what has to be one of the most remarkable rescue efforts that I'm familiar with. Looking back on Costa Concordia, where you had a very similar situation with a vessel that sank and listed on its side, that was a much simpler rescue operation, particularly in as much as it was in shallow water, and yet they encountered significant challenges, just as the Korean officials are as well. But if you look at the rescue operation and the sheer number of divers that are on station, we're looking at well over 200 divers that are coming from the Korean Coast Guard, the Korean Navy. We have reports that elements of the Navy Special Warfare Flotilla, also known as the Korean Duty T SEALs, are on station, which demonstrates the commitment that the government has placed on employing every opportunity to try to find survivors in this tragedy.
Right. Now, Kim, let me ask you this. It's been over 52 hours now since the accident. The rescue team has begun pumping oxygen into the vessel and has secured a route for the divers to enter the submerged ferry. However, we do have this latest news coming in that the ferry, which at the top of the ferry had been on the surface of the water, that has completely submerged now. Now, how will the two operations help rescue survivors, and what does that mean? Will that hinder rescue efforts?
Well, of course, the question that everyone has is, if there are survivors, they're going to be found in voids. And where are those voids going to be? Because that's where air has collected and where hopefully there might be survivors waiting for rescue. The problem is, of course, it's virtually impossible to detect where those voids are. They have made efforts using hammers along the outside of the hull, trying to get a response back after hammering on the hull, hoping that somebody inside might signal back to them. That has not been fruitful, but the fact that they have managed to get into the vessel now opens up the hope that they might be able to find some survivors. But again, when you look at the operational environment that the divers are working in, you have 2.5 to 5 knot currents. You have heavy silt in the water, which is causing visibility from between 0 and 5 feet. We also have cold water of some 10 degrees Celsius, 50 degrees Fahrenheit, which creates a hypothermic risk for anyone that's exposed to the water. And then, of course, you have the depth. And as you mentioned in your previous report, the divers can only stay down for a brief period of time before they have to be rotated out because of the potential for nitrogen narcosis and the bends. So it continues to be a very difficult situation.
Very challenging indeed. Now, reports indicate that at the time of the accident, only a few lifeboats were deployed. Now, in your view, why weren't all lifeboats sent out by the captain and the crew?
Well, here's one of the issues that we believe are being misreported. It is our understanding that there were no lifeboats per se on this vessel. That is, boats that do not have to be inflated through auto-inflation devices. What you have instead is reports of 46 life rafts. Now, these life rafts will not deploy until they have been manually released from the deck apparatus that lashes them to the deck. And what we have here is, again, a complication that has resulted from the delay by the captain to order an evacuation of the ship. It's our understanding that from the time this incident first occurred and the order by the captain to evacuate the passengers, some 30 minutes transpired and the vessel had already begun to list at least 5 degrees. If that's the case, by that time, it would have been virtually impossible, having given that order to evacuate the ship, for the ship's crew to get onto the decks and manually release the life rafts so that they could go into the water and inflate. And I believe that this is part of the reason that there are only 2 known life rafts to have been deployed. And this just goes to show how critical it was to give the evacuation order earlier rather than later.
Right, and investigations are currently underway on the captain and whether he neglected his duties with regards to the evacuations. Now, Kim Peterson, we are talking about a 6,800-ton vessel. We have been reporting about possible air pockets where survivors may be found. Now, given the structure of this ferry, how great a possibility do you think this is? And if so, what are the chances of survival given that it's been more than 2 days?
Well, if you do have survivors that have found their way into voids within the ship, and if they've been able to not be submerged in the water and therefore, potentially becoming hypothermic, remember that given the temperature of that water, somebody sitting in that water probably has about 2 hours before they become severely hypothermic. So if you have people that are in dry areas, in air pockets, there is the possibility of being able to locate them, but then the challenge becomes getting them out of the vessel, particularly if they're also injured, and of course they're going to be tired, hungry, frightened, and inexperienced in all likelihood with the type of apparatus that the divers will be using to get into their location. And just one other point of clarification, we've heard on a number of reports where the government is pumping oxygen into the ship. We find that highly unlikely. It is more than likely that they are instead pumping air into the ship, because if they were to be pumping pure oxygen into the ship and there was any sort of flammable material, a lighter, a short circuit of some sort, the concentration of oxygen could create a flammable or explosive environment. So we think that's probably something that needs to be clarified, and we suspect we're talking about air being pumped into the ship rather than oxygen.
Well, thank you for that clarification. And Kim Peterson, President of Security Dynamics and Governor Emeritus of the Maritime Security Council, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
As the hours turn into days, the families of the missing are trying their best not to lose hope and are praying at an indoor auditorium on Chindo Island for any news about their loved ones. Of course, we can only imagine that these are some harrowing times for those families. Our Yudian is standing by at the auditorium, and let's connect live with her. Liana, how are things looking there?
Hi, Gonyong. The atmosphere here has eased up just a bit. Everyone here is now watching in silence the monitors that show the live feeds of the site of accident and news footage as well. It was around more than 2 hours ago, there were signs of relief and applause following the announcements by the Coast Guard here that air is now being pumped into the ferry and that divers have successfully entered it for a search and rescue operation. Officials from the Coast Guard brought out a blueprint of the ferry at the front of the auditorium, explaining how the divers are expected to carry out the operation. Now, everyone here has been and still is extremely emotional this morning with time running out. Earlier this morning, the head of the victims' families here issued a plea statement which was broadcast nationwide, asking people across the nation to help them rescue their children. Families here were extremely furious after they found out that the number of rescue personnel announced by the government and the actual number is quite different. The government had announced yesterday that around 555 personnel were put into the rescue operation, while the number that the families here found out was just around 200.
You know, I can't even begin to imagine what it must be like to be in their shoes. They must be just traumatized, and I hear they're receiving counseling as well.
You're right, Kanyang. There is a special care center set up here at the gym where nurses and medical personnel are taking care of people, also offering mental help for many that are distraught here at the gymnasium. The past 2 nights have been extremely hard for these families of the victims. They have been under an overwhelming amount of stress. There are about 500 volunteers on site to help out at the relief center here. And it's lunchtime now, so there are food trucks outside from various welfare centers, and volunteers are also walking around handing out drinks and snacks as well. That's all from me for now, but I'll be bringing you more updates in just about an hour. Kanyang.
All right, thank you for your report, Lian. That was our Yudian reporting from Chindo Indoor Auditorium, where many of the family members of the now 268 missing are gathered, waiting for news of their loved ones. Now, for further details on what is going on with the government efforts to search and rescue these survivors, as well as investigations on the captain who neglected apparently his duties, let's go live to our Kim Ji-yeon. Now, Ji-yeon, the team held a press conference in the city of Mokpo earlier today. What did we learn from that?
Well, Konyang, the prosecutors and police said an investigation is ongoing to determine what led to the capsizing of the Seoul ferry. What's at question is whether the sinking was a man-made disaster. It's being speculated that an abrupt turn for a change in direction had caused the cargo in the vessel to shift to one side, leading to its capsizing. Fingers are being pointed towards the captain, who is believed to have been away from the steering room at the time of the incident. The team said the ferry's third officer, not the captain, was at the helm when the vessel encountered trouble, that is. The investigation team said that it conducted 2 rounds of investigations on the captain so far, but that they are having some difficulty at grasping the truth due to differing testimonies.
Now, Gianna, there are also allegations the captain of the ship and some of his crew members abandoned the ship, and this has likely contributed to a much higher death toll. What should have been done by the captain and crew members?
Well, for starters, Konyang, they should not have abandoned the ship without making sure that the passengers were safely off the ferry. This is clearly laid out in a manual in the Seoul ferry, which lays out the steps for crew members in case of an emergency. In the manual, it states that the captain and some of the crew members should have made an announcement to the passengers explaining what was happening to the vessel and what they should do to escape to safety. And then the crew members should have stayed on board to help passengers make it on life vessels before leaving themselves. But as you can see, not one of these regulations was followed by the captain and some of the crew members of the Seoul ferry on that fateful day.
Now, there have also been reports of text messages thought to be from survivors on the capsized ship, but those are found to be pranks. They're hard to believe, but and now there are talks about scams being used to take advantage of this tragedy.
That's right. The government is warning about a text scam that falsely indicates it is a message from Yonhap News Agency here in Seoul, and it includes a link to a video of the rescue operations at the site where the ferry is located. And smartphone users who click on this link, a malicious app is installed that will leak the personal information embedded in the device. It then induces the users to install a fake banking app that will then extract their financial information. The government is trying to prevent a further spread of this text and plans to distribute a vaccine to users. Back to you.
Really, it's appalling how even at times like these, times of distress, there are some people who would take advantage of others. It's just horrible. All right, thank you, Jian, for that report. Now, moving over to Jindo, let's go over live to our Kwon So-ah. She is standing by at the harbor, the Pengmok Harbor on Jindo Island. We have been getting reports that the ship the vessel has completely submerged. What is the current situation there?
Yes, Konyang, the Seoul ferry has disappeared from sight. It is not more visible, meaning there is a high chance it has entirely sunk below the water. Now, although the rescue crew succeeded in entering the ship earlier, the death toll is rising, making the situation here more and more tense. Now, families here at the harbor are watching the progress here, and I heard them crying out, "Please come back, my child. I am waiting here for you." And they have also expressed their frustration against the government due to the slow rescue progress, and also expressed anger towards reporters shouting, "Stop filming."
You know, it definitely must be a hard situation and harrowing times for them. So, but after searching for survivors, what is the next step going to be for the rescue operations?
Well, Kanyang, discussions are expected to continue on how the Seoul ferry is eventually going to be pulled up and when. Now, while 3 cranes arrived earlier at the Pengmok Harbor and one is still yet to arrive soon. In addition to the 4 cranes, Hyundai Samho Heavy Industries' own floating dock will also be included in the process. Experts say that'll be more effective. However, the families of the missed ones have worries that the process could kill any possible survivors.
Right. We want to be careful not for the vessel to lose balance and that the potential survivors in the vessel to stay put where they are. Now, the slow process, of course, progress has been blamed on the rough currents, which reportedly are shifting and keeping divers from being able to enter the vessel or reach the vessel. The weather conditions are playing a big factor. How is the weather there right now?
Right, the weather was pretty harsh during the last 2 days, which hindered a lot of the rescue processes. And around 2 hours ago, the rain had stopped and it seemed that the skies were clearing up, but now it is raining again and it is also still pretty foggy outside. Let's hope that the conditions won't be hindering any further rescue operations. Konyang?
Definitely. We will all keep our fingers crossed and send out our prayers. All right, Kwon So-ah, live from the harbor in Chindo Island. Thank you so much for that. Now, at times of crisis at sea or in the air, the actions of the crew can be crucial in saving lives, or rather endangering them. With eyes fixed on the captain of the Seoul ferry, we look back at 2 recent disasters with 2 very different outcomes. Our Kim Min-ji takes a look.
In 2009, U.S. Airways Flight 1549 struck a flock of birds just minutes after taking off from LaGuardia Airport in New York City, and 2 of its engines lost power. The pilot immediately informed passengers of the situation and decided to make an emergency landing on the Hudson River. The rough landing was a success and the passengers scampered out to the wings of the plane to be rescued. Not a single life was lost. Although it was a critical moment, the pilot and crew members stayed calm and were able to create what is known as a miracle on the Hudson. The pilot of the Flight 1549, Captain Chesley Sullenberger, made sure that all passengers were off the plane before escaping himself.
Because of their efforts and the calm, steady leadership shown by the plane's pilot and crew, miraculously, all 155 people on that plane made it to safety.
However, that wasn't the case when Italian cruise ship Costa Concordia sank after it capsized off waters in Tuscany in 2012. The ship struck a reef, causing a huge hole in the side of the liner. The scene turned to chaos in moments.
Then we had a blackout, and everybody was just screaming out. All the passengers were running up and down. And then we went to our cabins to get to know what's going on.
The captain abandoned the ship early on, leaving behind passengers who were in peril. 32 people were killed. The captain was arrested on charges of manslaughter, dereliction of duty, and escaping the ship before the evacuation was complete. Likewise, the captain of the Seoul ferry is also being investigated to see whether he and some of his crew members abandoned the ship before making sure passengers had safely evacuated. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
Now, 179 passengers were rescued on the day of the accident. They may have survived, and those others who are still missing are grieved for, but most of them have been treated physically and psychologically. Let's now go live to our Connie Kim. She joins us live from the Korea University Ansan Hospital, where the largest number of patients are being treated. Now, Connie, before we talk about the survivors, I know more bodies have been brought to the hospital. It must have been an emotional scene. What's the atmosphere there like?
Right, Konyang. I'm at Korea University Ansan Hospital. An additional two deceased passengers have arrived here at around 10 a.m. local time. And I must say the atmosphere here was absolutely devastating, with relatives crying out loud and continuously sobbing. A total of 5 of the dead are here in the hospital, and the names of the deceased are being shouted out here and there. Parents are crying out loud, hugging each other, and some are saying that they didn't even have a chance to speak to their children before the vessel went down. Now, and with endless stream of sobbing friends and families paying their respects at the hospital, Tanon High School is considering to set up an incense altar within the school.
Now, a number of the students who managed to escape the sinking ferry with their lives are also receiving treatment at the hospital. How are they doing?
Well, a press briefing was held here at around 12:30, and the director of the hospital says a total of 76 people are receiving medical treatment here. 72 of them from Tanon High School, along with 1 teacher and 3 other passengers. He said a stress test was conducted on the students, and most of the students are suffering from moderate levels of stress, but declined to mention the specific numbers. He also said depending on the mental conditions of the students, they have provided counseling sessions to both parents and students. Now, officials say there are students with harsh critical conditions who cannot speak at the moment from shock. They said they'll continue to provide help to students and parents and will also cooperate with the education and welfare ministries.
All right, thank you, Connie. That was Arirang News reporter Connie Kim reporting live from Korea University Ansan Hospital, where many of the injured are being treated. Now, just to give you a recap, we have out of the 475 people on board this sunken ferry, which happened about 53 hours ago. We have 28 deaths confirmed, 179 rescued, and 268 people remain unaccounted for. That's all from me at this hour. Our special coverage on the nation's search and rescue efforts for survivors in Korea's ferry disaster continues. Join me again at the top of the hour.